General Hospital spoilers tease that after months of silence, unconfirmed rumors, and aching anticipation from devoted fans, Roger Howarth has officially confirmed his return to General Hospital, setting off a wave of excitement and speculation that has reignited a spark across the soap opera world. But with the confirmation comes a deliberate and tantalizing mystery. He has not revealed whether he will be reprising one of his previous roles, the tortured and redeemed Franco Baldwin, or the enigmatic and ill-fated Austin Gatlin Holt, or if he will debut as an entirely new character. This carefully calculated ambiguity has only intensified the fervor around his comeback, adding fuel to a fire that has been smoldering since his last exit in late 2023. The atmosphere in Port Charles is already tense, riddled with unresolved storylines, unsolved murders, and characters teetering on the edge of implosion, making the timing of Roger's return both poetic and explosive. Whether he steps back into the chaos as a familiar face or a brand new player, his re-entry into the narrative will undoubtedly shift the balance of power and emotion across the canvas. For many, the hope that Franco could somehow return has never died. His death in 2021, at the hands of Peter August, devastated fans who had followed his incredible redemption arc from a disturbed outcast to a loving father and devoted partner. His journey was one of the most compelling in the show's modern history, and the emotional depth Roger brought to the character made him irreplaceable. Bringing Franco back from the dead would not only electrify the fanbase but would also plunge beloved characters like Elizabeth into emotional freefall, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Conversely, the idea that Austin's death might have been faked, possibly as a desperate move to escape the control of Cyrus Renaud or to infiltrate a deeper criminal network, remains a viable theory. His murder, still officially unsolved, hangs over the show like a dark cloud, and Roger's return could signal the unraveling of a far more sinister plot involving power, betrayal, and survival. There is also the increasingly plausible possibility that Roger will once again reinvent himself with an entirely new character, marking the fourth time he has transformed within the GH universe. From Todd Manning to Franco to Austin, each incarnation has been unique, layered, and magnetic in its own right. Introducing Roger in a new role could allow the writers to link him to existing families in unexpected ways or tie him to one of the show's expanding criminal conspiracies, injecting new energy into legacy storylines while offering a fresh slate to explore. Such a move would also reinforce Roger's unmatched ability to adapt and thrive in different narrative environments, a quality that has made him one of daytime television's most dynamic and enduring talents. The implications of his return reach far beyond his individual arc. If Franco is alive, Elizabeth's world shatters once again, and her relationships with Finn, her children, and her own sense of closure would all be thrown into turmoil. If Austin is revealed to be alive, it would not only shake the Quartermaine family to its core but could expose a deeper web of corruption involving Cyrus and possibly Drew. If Roger returns as someone new, the potential for new alliances, rivalries, and long-lost family connections is endless. His presence alone has the power to resurrect forgotten storylines, heal or reopen emotional wounds, and tip the scales in ongoing battles for control in Port Charles. Roger's confirmation has resonated deeply with fans who have long admired his versatility, intensity, and the emotional authenticity he brings to every role. His previous departures were met with grief, but always with the hope that he would one day return. That day has now come. And even though the details remain under wraps, his reappearance signifies more than just another casting update. It is a turning point. It is a reminder of how one actor can anchor generations of storytelling and how his return, in any capacity, has the potential to alter the course of the show in profound and irreversible ways. As the mystery deepens and anticipation mounts, the residents of Port Charles are unknowingly bracing for the arrival of a force that will change everything. Whether Roger comes back with Franco's haunted eyes, Austin's moral ambiguity, or the swagger of a completely new persona, the story is poised to explode. Secrets will resurface. Loyalties will be tested, and the lines between life and death, truth and illusion, will blur once again. And in true General Hospital fashion, when Roger Howarth walks back onto the screen, nothing, and no one, will ever be the same. Roger Howarth's long-anticipated return to General Hospital is now shrouded in a new wave of speculation, but if the emerging whispers from behind the scenes are true, then fans may be witnessing the impossible. Franco Baldwin is coming back from the dead. This revelation, if confirmed, would not only send emotional shockwaves across Port Charles but would upend the carefully constructed balance of relationships and legacies. Especially as tensions between Drew and Jason erupt into chaos and Elizabeth finds herself pulled back into the orbit of a love story that was never truly finished. Franco's return wouldn't just be a nostalgic twist, it would be the epicenter of a seismic shift, bringing long-buried trauma to the surface and reigniting flames of love, grief, guilt, and redemption that have been smoldering just beneath the surface for years. Franco's original death in 2021 was a gut-wrenching moment, a turning point that scarred Elizabeth, devastated her sons, and catalyzed Drew's slow descent into moral ambiguity. But now, in the aftermath of Austin's murder, the escalation of Jason's return, and the dangerous unraveling of Drew's psyche, the stage is perfectly set for a resurrection, not just of a man, but of every unresolved emotion tied to him. Elizabeth has tried to move forward, to reconstruct a life without the man who challenged and changed her. But that life has never truly fit. The hole Franco left behind wasn't just emotional, it was existential. His absence haunted her every step, and in many ways, she never stopped waiting for the impossible. The possibility of Franco's return, however improbable, now no longer feels out of reach. It feels inevitable. And as Drew and Jason spiral into open conflict, the return of Franco would inject even more volatility into an already combustible triangle. Drew, who once carried Franco's memories as a result of the memory mapping experiment, now finds himself consumed by rage, control, and obsession. His once heroic image is cracking under pressure. And his manipulation of people like Kai and Jacinda is dragging him closer to a moral abyss. Jason, on the other hand, is struggling to reclaim a place in a world that has changed in his absence, a world where Franco once filled a role that Jason himself never truly embraced. The reintroduction of Franco, especially at a time when Jason is grappling with guilt, loyalty, and identity, would blur the already fragile lines between these men. Franco was the man with Jason's face but none of his emotional walls. He loved Elizabeth fearlessly. He embraced the chaos within him. He changed. Jason never did. Drew thought he could. And now, with Franco potentially alive, both men will be forced to confront everything they chose to forget. Franco's return would not just be symbolic, it would be emotionally explosive. Elizabeth's carefully reconstructed world would implode. Cameron, now away and changed by his grief, could be brought back into the fold to confront the man he mourned and the truth of what it means to live with unfinished grief. Scotty, who lost his son and never truly recovered, would finally have the moment of reconciliation and closure that was stolen from him. And the entire town would be forced to confront the idea that in Port Charles, death is never absolute, especially when there are still stories left to tell. The psychological implications of Franco's return would stretch far beyond the core canvas. The man who once painted through pain and redefined what it meant to change would now be returning to a world more cynical and broken than the one he left. He would see a Drew twisted into something unrecognizable. He would find a Jason uncertain of his place in the Corinthos hierarchy. He would walk back into a town where love is fragile. Alliances are temporary, and the truth is always shifting. And in doing so, he would become a mirror for every character forced to confront their past, their losses, and their own darkness. If Roger Howarth is indeed returning as Franco, it signals more than just the resurrection of a beloved character, it marks the return of complexity, of ambiguity, of emotional weight that no other figure can quite deliver. Franco was never easy. He was never clean. But he was real. And in a town suffocating under secrets and power plays, his reappearance would force the characters, and the viewers, to feel again. To grieve again. To believe, even reluctantly, that people can return from the dead and still carry something worth fighting for. The tension rising between Drew and Jason is reaching a fever pitch. And Franco's presence will only tighten the noose. Because Franco is not just a man. He is memory. He is regret. He is a living contradiction to everything Jason and Drew thought they understood about themselves. And with Franco back in the mix, all their rationalizations, their bitterness, their silence, their excuses, will fall apart. There is no safe way to bring Franco back. No clean resolution waiting at the end of his reintroduction. There is only a storm, fueled by love and betrayal. Grief and obsession, pain and longing. And Roger Howarth is the only actor who can walk into that storm and make it feel both devastating and utterly necessary. His return is not just a plot twist. It's a reckoning. Franco's long-awaited return to Port Charles would have already been enough to send shockwaves through the entire canvas. But what no one could have predicted is that he wouldn't come back alone. He would return with Britt Westbourne by his side, a woman once thought to be lost forever. Now standing in defiance of death and deception. Their reappearance, side by side, two resurrected souls bound by trauma, secrets, and a shared thirst for answers, brings not healing, but war. Because while the town may rejoice at first glance, what lies beneath is far darker. The truth is this: Heather Weber, Franco's unstable and violent mother, murdered Britt. Years before Britt's disappearance, Heather orchestrated her death in a moment of jealous madness, believing that Franco, her special son, would never truly belong to anyone else, not to Liz. Not to Britt, not to the world of family and love that he was beginning to carve for himself. What Heather never knew, or perhaps didn't care about, was that Peter August, Britt's half-brother, had also betrayed Franco in a different way, targeting him through cruel manipulation, medical sabotage, and psychological warfare during the height of his breakdown. Peter had once viewed Franco as a threat, a loose end from his memory mapping past, and he did everything possible to destroy him from the inside out. That shared history, once fragmented and buried beneath layers of lies, now rises with a vengeance. Franco, no longer a man seeking redemption but one returning with clarity and scars, remembers what was done to him. Britt, carrying the knowledge of her mother's crimes and her brother's treachery, refuses to let those betrayals stay buried. Their return is not a soft reunion, it is a reckoning. Britt and Franco are not here to relive old romances or play house in a town that failed them both. They are here to finish what was started, and in the process, they ignite a firestorm that consumes everyone around them. Caught directly in the middle are Elizabeth and Jason, two figures with deep emotional ties to both returning souls. And now forced to navigate a battlefield where loyalty has no clear lines. Elizabeth, still haunted by Franco's death, finds herself torn between gratitude and fear. She cannot reconcile the man she loved with the one standing before her now, alive, changed, and carrying the rage of someone who remembers every betrayal and every goodbye that never came. Jason, still grappling with guilt over Franco's final days and now standing beside Britt, a woman whose death he once mourned, is forced to confront truths he spent years burying. The tension between Franco and Jason explodes almost immediately. Franco has always represented the life Jason could never fully embrace, the emotional vulnerability, the flawed humanity, the capacity for change. Now, with Britt at his side, Franco is no longer pleading for understanding. He is demanding answers. He wants to know why Peter wasn't stopped sooner. Why Jason walked away when Franco begged him for help. Why the town allowed his name to be dragged through the dirt even after he died. Jason, meanwhile, finds himself looking into the eyes of a man he thought was gone and seeing everything he never said out loud, guilt, fear, and a lingering shame that cuts deeper than any bullet. But the true war brews between Britt and her past. She knows now that her mother never changed, that her death was not a twist of fate but a premeditated act of control. Heather murdered her out of obsession, and Peter exploited her absence to protect his secrets. The rage Britt carries is cold and calculated. She doesn't want sympathy. She wants consequences. And with Franco by her side, she has found both the emotional and tactical strength to ensure that those consequences are delivered. They begin investigating, unearthing records. confronting former allies, even breaking into old WSB files. And what they discover is worse than they imagined, a cover-up, one that involved not just Peter and Heather, but others in the town who were all too willing to look the other way when it came to the Westbourne and Baldwin names. As this twisted saga unfolds, the people of Port Charles are forced to choose sides. Laura, torn between justice and her maternal instinct to protect the innocent remnants of her fractured family, watches in horror as long-buried sins resurface. Scott Baldwin, once devastated by Franco's death, is rocked by his son's return and Brit's survival. But he quickly realizes that this is no happy ending. It is a war that might destroy the town before it ever heals it. Carly, Nina, even Drew find themselves pulled into the crossfire as the fallout from Peter and Heather's sin spreads like wildfire. And at the center of it all, Elizabeth stands in silence, watching the man she loved become something both terrifying and beautiful. Franco is not the same. He is raw, sharp, and stripped of apology. But beneath the scars is the man who once held her hand in the darkest hours, and despite everything, her heart remembers. She tries to reach him, to pull him back from the brink. But every step forward only drags her deeper into the spiral. Jason, too, tries to hold the line, but as he watches Brit become more consumed by her past, and Franco become the instrument of her justice, he begins to realize that this fight isn't about redemption, it's about retribution. The return of Franco and Brit isn't a salvation story. It's a reckoning soaked in blood, betrayal, and the madness that has long plagued the families of Port Charles. Heather's crimes, Peter's manipulations, and the silence of those who knew and did nothing have all led to this moment. And now, the dead have come back not for forgiveness, but for vengeance. The obsession rises. The tension spreads. And the town that thought it had seen every twist is about to learn that nothing stays buried forever, not love, not truth, and certainly not Franco Baldwin. Franco's return to Port Charles is not merely a resurrection, it's the genesis of a storm long foretold and quietly ignored. Beneath the surface of every whispered conversation and every sideways glance lies a deeper tremor, one that speaks of unfinished business, broken promises, and truths buried so deeply they've warped into something unrecognizable. Roger Howarth's homecoming comes not as Austin, not as some new iteration of a redeemed soul, but as Franco Baldwin, fractured, resurrected, and now stripped of illusion. It's not a clean slate. It's scorched earth, and the ashes are still smoldering with every name that betrayed him. Chief among them is Drew, the so-called twin reborn through lies, who now holds the keys to influence and corruption in equal measure. And Franco? He is not back to negotiate. He is here to dismantle everything Drew has built and burn what's left. It begins with the silence. Franco does not announce himself. He moves through the shadows of the hospital, the streets, the galleries, an echo of a man thought to be gone, but who has returned with memory sharpened and heart hardened. His presence rattles Liz to the core. She doesn't know whether to fall into his arms or run. The man before her is familiar in form but foreign in soul. There is something colder about him. Something that once was passion now morphed into precision. He speaks less of healing and more of clarity. His return isn't about redemption, it's about retribution. Drew, once the benefactor of everyone's forgiveness, is about to be exposed for the predator he's become. What Franco knows is terrifying. Drew's alliances run deeper than anyone suspects. He's been funneling money into shell companies that connect directly to Sidwell's most dangerous operations. Those attacks on Sonny's territory, the surveillance against Michael, the manipulation of Jason's legal battles, none of it is coincidental. Franco uncovers that Drew isn't just playing politics in Port Charles. He's orchestrating a takeover. One psychological and systemic, aimed at uprooting the moral compass of the city. He wants control, not just of companies or names, but of narrative, of history, of legacy. Franco has seen this before, in Peter, in Heather, in the dark corridors of Ferncliff, and he recognizes the signs. Drew is slipping, and he's dragging the city with him. That's the adjustment Franco has made, no longer to heal from his past, but to use it as armor in the war to come. The plot thickens when Britt resurfaces. Presumed dead. Her survival is another miracle, another manipulated death in a town full of vanishing truths. Her reappearance sets the stage for a brutal reckoning. Franco and Britt are not just survivors. They're orphans of legacy, bonded by betrayal. Heather, Franco's mother, was responsible for Britt's stabbing. Peter, Britt's half-brother, nearly destroyed Franco's life with manipulation and forced memory transfers. Now, these two, returned from the dead, find themselves caught between vengeance and survival. They don't speak of justice in the traditional sense. They speak of symmetry, righting the scales not in courtrooms but in confrontation. Jason finds himself increasingly trapped in the middle. His loyalty to Sonny is unquestioned, but the emotional undercurrent pulling him toward Liz and his unresolved guilt over Franco's original death makes things impossible to ignore. Franco doesn't want Jason's help, but he does want Jason's understanding. The enemy now is not the past, it's the present masquerading as righteousness. Drew has weaponized morality, cloaking his ambition in the language of honor, and Port Charles has swallowed it whole. But Franco is the splinter in that illusion. He walks into Drew's fundraisers. He infiltrates the board meetings. He shows up at memorials. Not to grieve, but to remind them all of what they forgot. Of who they buried and what lies they told to sleep at night. The town begins to feel it. Michael senses the shift in energy. Carly, always protective, begins asking questions she swore she'd never ask again. Nina, reeling from her own losses, recognizes something broken in Franco that mirrors what's broken in her. And then there's Liz, torn between the man she tried to forget and the truth she can no longer deny. Drew has been manipulating her too, subtly, convincing her that safety comes from silence. But now, with Franco standing before her once more, she sees the pattern. She sees how the gaslight flickered just long enough to let the shadows in. Franco's art becomes a weapon. His new exhibit is not just a collection of emotion. It's a map of Drew's rise. Painted in metaphors so visceral the town cannot look away. A businessman's suit rotting from the inside. A pair of twins, one masked, the other bleeding. A woman weeping into a mirror that reflects someone else entirely. Each piece is a key, a warning, a confession. Drew attends the opening. He claps politely. But he knows. He sees the challenge etched into every frame. And for the first time in months, he feels the cold breath of fear on his neck. But Franco's revenge is not impulsive, it's symphonic. He reaches out to the families Drew has harmed. He uncovers the hidden payments, the falsified reports, the lies spoken in the name of progress. He leaks files to the press. He triggers WSB inquiries. He allies, quietly, with Britt to expose Drew's medical fraud, his involvement in illegal trials masked as rehabilitation programs. Every revelation tightens the noose. But Franco never rushes the final act. He waits. Because the most damning evidence comes not from reports or recordings, but from memory. Franco has begun to remember things implanted in him during Peter's experiments. Hidden logs. Names. Locations. Including an encrypted file that confirms Drew was not just manipulated by Peter, but complicit, especially in the final days before Peter's death. If Franco exposes this, Drew's entire empire will collapse. But the price is high. Jason will have to choose. Liz will have to shatter every illusion she's clung to. And Franco will have to relinquish the one thing he still fears losing, his grip on what remains of his sanity. Yet even in madness, there's method. Roger Howarth's return as Franco is not about restoring the past. It's about detonating the future Drew tried to build on lies. Port Charles stands at a precipice. And Franco is no longer a man seeking peace. He is a reckoning in motion, silent until the final scream, waiting to bring it all down in one brutal, unforgettable act of truth. And this time, no one will look away.